Let us begin our journey together, softly, peacefully, traveling back through time to ancient India, more than 25 centuries ago. We arrive in a place of golden sunlight and gentle warmth, where the air itself seems to carry wisdom on its breath. Here, in the foothills of the Himalayas, in a kingdom called Kapilavastu, our story begins not with a Buddha, but with a child, a prince, born into comfort and luxury beyond imagining. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, which means he who achieves his aim. And though his parents could not know it then, he would indeed achieve something remarkable, something that would echo through all the centuries to follow, reaching even to this present moment as you rest here, breathing softly, allowing yourself to settle into this ancient story. Siddhartha's father was a king, a ruler of the Shakya clan, and like all parents, he wanted only happiness for his son. But this desire for his child's happiness would take an unusual form, for the king had received a prophecy, a prediction that young Siddhartha would become either a great king or a great spiritual teacher. Wanting to ensure his son would follow in his footsteps as ruler, Siddhartha's father made a careful decision. He would shelter his son from all suffering, from all pain, from anything that might turn the prince's mind toward spiritual questions rather than worldly power. And so Siddhartha grew up surrounded by beauty, by pleasure, by everything that might make a young man content with the material world. 3 palaces were built for him, one for each season, each more magnificent than the last, with gardens that seemed to have captured paradise itself within their walls. Musicians played the sweetest melodies, dancers moved like flowing water, the finest foods were prepared, and importantly, critically, nothing unpleasant was ever allowed to enter, no one who was sick, no one who was old. Nothing that would suggest that life contained anything other than youth and health and endless comfort. Imagine for a moment such a life. Imagine being surrounded only by beauty, only by pleasure, never seeing the other side of existence. For years this was Siddhartha's world, a golden cage so beautiful that one might never realize it was a cage at all. He married a beautiful princess named Yashodhara. He had a son. He excelled in all the arts expected of a prince: archery, horseback riding, scholarly pursuits. By all appearances, his father's plan had worked perfectly. And yet something stirred within Siddhartha's heart, something his father's careful planning could not prevent. It was a question, simple and profound. What lies beyond these palace walls? What is the world truly like? This question grew and grew, as questions do when we try to ignore them, until finally Siddhartha asked his charioteer to take him beyond the protected boundaries of his sheltered life. And it was on these journeys, these simple excursions into the world as it actually is, that everything would change. Everything would begin. The prince who had known only pleasure was about to encounter the truth of human existence, and that encounter would set him on a path that would illuminate the way for countless others, including perhaps, in some small way, for you, as you lie here now, breathing gently, allowing this ancient story to wash over you like a peaceful tide. The first journey beyond the palace walls brought something unexpected, something Siddhartha's father had worked so carefully to prevent. As the prince rode through the streets in his chariot, taking in the sights of the world beyond his golden refuge, he saw a figure by the side of the road, an old man bent with the weight of years, skin weathered and wrinkled, walking slowly with the aid of a staff. Siddhartha, who had never seen old age, who had been surrounded only by youth and vitality, turned to his charioteer in confusion. "What has happened to this man?" he asked. And his charioteer, unable to lie to the prince's direct question, answered simply, "This is old age. It comes to everyone. It came to your ancestors. It will come to you." These words settled over Siddhartha like a heavy blanket, and the joy of his excursion dimmed. but there were more journeys to come, more encounters that would crack open the protected shell around his understanding. On the second journey, he saw a person racked with illness, body trembling with fever, skin marked by disease. Again he asked, and again his charioteer answered, "This is sickness. It can come to anyone, at any time. No one is exempt." On the third journey, the encounter was more profound still, for Siddhartha saw a funeral procession, saw a body being carried to the cremation grounds, saw the grief of those left behind. And now the question that rose in his throat was almost too difficult to ask. "Does this happen to everyone?" he whispered. "Yes," his charioteer replied. "Death comes to all, to the rich and the poor, the powerful and the weak, the good and the bad. It is the one thing no one can avoid." Now, we might think this would have plunged Siddhartha into despair, and indeed, something in him did break open that day. The innocent prince who had known only pleasure was gone forever. But on a fourth journey he saw something else, something that would point the way forward. He saw a wandering ascetic, a spiritual seeker who had renounced worldly life, and on this person's face, despite owning nothing, despite living the simplest of lives, Siddhartha saw something remarkable. He saw peace. He saw a kind of contentment that had nothing to do with palaces or pleasures or protection from life's difficulties. And in that moment a new question was born, one that would drive everything that followed. Is it possible to find peace even in a world that contains old age, sickness, and death? Is there a happiness that doesn't depend on pretending these things don't exist? These questions burned in Siddhartha's heart. They kept him awake at night. They made the palace walls feel not protective, but suffocating. And so, one night, when his wife and infant son were sleeping peacefully, when the moon hung silent in the sky, Siddhartha made a decision that must have torn his heart, even as he knew it was necessary. He left. He walked away from his palace, his position, his family, his entire comfortable life, and set out to find the answer to the question that had seized his soul. He was 29 years old. He took nothing with him but his determination to understand. He cut his long princely hair, he exchanged his fine clothes for the simple robes of a seeker, and he began the journey that would eventually lead him to become not Siddhartha the prince, but the Buddha, the awakened one. But that awakening was still years away, still waiting at the end of a long and difficult path. For 6 years, Siddhartha practiced the most extreme forms of spiritual discipline known in his time. He sought out the greatest meditation teachers, masters who could enter states of consciousness that seemed to transcend ordinary reality. He learned from them, practiced their techniques with the same dedication he had once brought to princely arts, and quickly mastered everything they could teach. But each time, having reached the highest levels these teachers could offer, Siddhartha found that his fundamental question remained unanswered. These states of consciousness, however profound, however peaceful, were temporary. When they ended, the questions remained. Suffering remained. So he went further, joined a group of ascetics who believed that enlightenment could be found through extreme self-denial, through punishing the body so severely that the spirit might break free. And Siddhartha, with the same determination that had driven him from the palace, threw himself into these practices. He ate almost nothing, reducing his diet to a single grain of rice each day. He sat in meditation for hours, days, weeks, barely moving, barely breathing. He pushed his body to the very edge of what it could endure. His ribs showed through his skin. His eyes sank deep into their sockets. He became so thin, so weakened, that it was said when he touched his stomach, he could feel his spine. His 5 companions in this practice looked at him with awe and respect, certain that someone who could practice such severe discipline must surely be close to the ultimate truth. But Siddhartha, even in his weakened state, began to realize something important, something that would become central to his later teaching. He realized that this extreme self-denial was just another form of the extreme self-indulgence he had known in the palace. Both were extremes. Both were forms of violence. One turned outward toward pleasure, one turned inward toward pain, and neither led to the peace he was seeking. One day, as he sat by a river, weak and discouraged, barely able to stand, he heard a boat passing by. On the boat, a music teacher was instructing a student about the sitar, the beautiful stringed instrument. The teacher's words drifted across the water to where Siddhartha sat. "If you tune the string too tight," the teacher said, "it will break. But if you leave it too loose, it will not play." The right sound comes from the middle way, neither too tight nor too loose. These simple words, meant for a music lesson, struck Siddhartha with the force of revelation, the middle way, neither extreme indulgence nor extreme denial. He looked down at his emaciated body, at what his harsh practices had done, and he understood. This was not the path. And so he made another decision, one that shocked his 5 companions. He decided to eat. He accepted a bowl of milk rice from a kind village woman who was worried about the starving holy man she had found by the river. He took the food gratefully and ate, felt strength slowly returning to his body. His companions were horrified. They had believed in him, followed his example, and now here he was, giving up, breaking his vows, accepting food like an ordinary person. They left him in disgust, certain he had failed. But Siddhartha knew something they did not yet understand. He had not given up. He had simply found the right way to continue, neither starving nor indulging, neither punishing the body nor worshipping it, the middle way. And now, with his strength gradually returning, with a clear mind and a body that was neither pampered nor tortured, Siddhartha was ready for the final stage of his journey. He walked until he found a large tree, a fig tree with broad leaves and strong roots, in a place called Bodhi. He sat down beneath this tree, crossed his legs, and made a quiet vow. He would not rise from this spot until he had found what he was seeking. Beneath the Bodhi tree, as it would come to be known, the tree of awakening, Siddhartha sat in meditation. Night fell around him, wrapping the world in darkness, but still he sat. The stories tell us that as he sat there, he was tested, challenged by all the forces, both internal and external, that keep us from seeing clearly. Traditional accounts speak of Mara, the personification of illusion and attachment, who came to Siddhartha with temptations and terrors. But we might understand this more simply, more personally, as the arising of every doubt, every fear, every desire that normally pulls us away from seeing things as they truly are. All the attachments that had bound him to his old life arose in his mind, memories of his wife, his child, his father's kingdom. The pleasures he had known in the palace appeared before him, tempting him to return. Then came fear, visions of everything that could go wrong, every danger, every threat. And then came doubt, perhaps the subtlest challenge of all. Who was he to think he could solve the mystery of suffering? What made him think he was capable of finding what so many others had sought and failed to find? Why not just give up, accept that life is suffering, and make the best of it? But Siddhartha had learned something in his years of searching. He had learned that thoughts and feelings, no matter how powerful, are like weather. They arise, they change, they pass away. So he simply sat, witnessing everything that arose, not fighting it, not indulging it, simply seeing it clearly and letting it be. As the night deepened, his meditation deepened too. Layer by layer, he let go of everything he thought he knew, everything he thought he was. And as he let go, his mind became clearer, more spacious, more able to see what had always been there, but had been obscured by all his wanting and fearing and thinking. First he saw clearly the nature of his own past lives, the endless cycle of birth and death, the wheel of existence turning and turning with no beginning and no end. Then his vision expanded further, and he saw the same pattern extending to all beings, all lives, all caught in the same cycle, all experiencing the same suffering, born of the same ignorance. And then, as dawn began to break, as the morning star appeared in the still dark sky, Siddhartha saw something that changed everything. He saw clearly the chain of causation, the links that bind us to suffering. He saw how ignorance leads to craving, how craving leads to attachment, how attachment leads to suffering. He saw the whole pattern, clear as crystal, obvious once seen but hidden until that moment. And in seeing the chain, he saw how it could be broken. He saw that suffering is not inevitable, not punishment, not simply the way things are, but the result of a process, and any process that has a cause can be ended by removing that cause. In that moment of perfect clarity, as the sun rose over the hills of Bodh Gaya, Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, the awakened one. He had found what he was seeking, not by going somewhere else, not by becoming someone else, but by seeing clearly, right here, right now, how things actually are. The peace he felt was not the peace of pleasant circumstances or the peace of escaping from difficulty. It was the deep peace that comes from understanding, from seeing through the illusions that cause us to suffer. He had promised he would not rise until he found the truth. Now, after 49 days beneath the tree, he slowly opened his eyes, unfolded his legs, and stood. The Buddha stood and looked out at the world he had left 6 years before. It was the same world, still containing old age, sickness, and death. But now he saw it with completely different eyes, and now came a choice. What should he do with this understanding? The Buddha almost decided to say nothing, to simply live out his days in the peace he had found, because how could words possibly convey what he had experienced? How could he explain what could only be understood through direct seeing? But then compassion arose in his heart, compassion for all those who suffered as he had suffered, who searched as he had searched, who wondered if there was a way to peace. And so the Buddha decided to teach, to share what he had discovered, and his first thought was to find his 5 former companions, the ascetics who had left him when he abandoned extreme self-denial. He found them in a deer park near Benares, and at first they wanted nothing to do with him. They had decided he was a failure, a quitter. But as the Buddha approached, something in his presence, some quality of peace and clarity, made them pause. They agreed to listen. And so, in that deer park, the Buddha gave his first teaching, setting in motion what Buddhists call the wheel of Dharma, the wheel of truth. He began by explaining what he had discovered, organizing it in a way that was clear and practical, a way that anyone could understand and apply to their own life. He called these foundational insights the Four Noble Truths, and as you rest here now, breathing softly, letting yourself settle more and more deeply into comfort, we can explore these truths together gently, allowing them to rest in your awareness like leaves floating on still water. The first truth is the truth of suffering, or dukkha in the Buddha's language. This doesn't mean that life is only suffering, or that we should be pessimistic or depressed. Rather, it's simply the honest acknowledgement that suffering exists, that dissatisfaction exists, that even our pleasures are often tinged with an undercurrent of unease. We suffer when we experience pain, yes, but we also suffer when we try to hold on to pleasure that inevitably changes. We suffer when we don't get what we want, and we suffer when we get what we don't want. Even when things are going well, there's often an anxiety about when it will end. The Buddha was simply inviting us to see this clearly, honestly, without pretending or looking away. The second truth is the truth of the origin of suffering. Suffering has a cause, and that cause is craving, or tanha, literally thirst. It's the desperate wanting, the clinging, the pushing away, the constant reaching for something other than what is. We crave pleasure and try to avoid pain. We crave permanence in a world of constant change. We crave a solid, unchanging self when everything in our experience is actually fluid and interconnected. This craving is like drinking salt water when we're thirsty. It only makes the thirst stronger. But here comes the liberating insight, the third noble truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering. If suffering has a cause, then removing that cause ends the suffering. It is possible to find peace, to awaken, to be free from the endless cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. The Buddha wasn't just theorizing, he was offering testimony. He had found this freedom himself, and he was declaring that it was possible for others too. This is perhaps the most hopeful message at the heart of Buddhism. We are not doomed to suffer endlessly. Freedom is possible. And the fourth truth is the truth of the path, the practical method for ending suffering. This is the Noble Eightfold Path, and it's called noble because it leads to freedom, and eightfold because it has 8 interconnected aspects. Right understanding and right intention. These begin the path with wisdom. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood. These establish ethical conduct. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These develop the mental discipline needed for awakening. When the Buddha spoke of right, he meant something like complete or integrated, not a moral judgment, but rather actions and attitudes that are aligned with understanding, that don't create more suffering. Together, these 8 aspects form what the Buddha called the middle way, that same balance he had discovered between extremes, now extended to all areas of life, neither indulgence nor denial, neither grasping nor rejecting, but a path of wise balance, of seeing clearly, of acting with compassion, of training the mind to be present with what is. And as the Buddha finished this first teaching in the deer park, his 5 former companions understood. They saw that he had indeed found what he had been seeking, and they became his first students, his first followers on the path. From that moment, the teachings began to spread, gently, like ripples moving outward across still water, carrying the possibility of freedom, the possibility of letting go, the possibility of peace. And so the teachings spread quietly, peacefully, like morning light moving across a valley. The Buddha walked through the villages and cities of ancient India, speaking softly to those who would listen, offering not commandments, but invitations, not rules, but reflections. He taught in gardens and under trees, beside rivers and in modest homes, always returning to the same gentle truths, the same compassionate understanding of human suffering and the path to its end. Among the many concepts he shared with his followers, 3 stand at the heart of his teaching, 3 marks of existence that, when understood deeply, illuminate the way toward letting go. The first of these is impermanence, a word that sounds so simple, yet contains such profound wisdom. Anicca, the Buddha called it in his own language, the understanding that all things are in constant flux, that nothing remains the same from one moment to the next. Consider for a moment the breath moving through your body right now, gently rising and falling. Each breath is unique, never to be repeated, in exactly the same way. The air that fills your lungs in this moment will never fill them in quite this configuration again. Even your body, which seems so solid, so permanent, is constantly changing at levels beyond your awareness, cells dying and being born, atoms rearranging themselves in an endless dance of transformation. The Buddha asked his students to observe this truth not as an abstract idea, but as a lived reality. He encouraged them to watch the seasons change, to notice how flowers bloom and fade, how clouds form and dissolve, how even the mightiest mountains are slowly worn down by wind and rain. Nothing escapes this law of change, he taught gently. Not our possessions, not our relationships, not our circumstances, not even our thoughts and feelings. Each emotion that arises in your mind, whether joy or sorrow, anger or peace, is temporary by its very nature. It appears, it exists for a time, and then it passes away, like a wave rising from the ocean and returning to it. Understanding impermanence deeply is not meant to make us sad, the Buddha explained with great compassion. Rather, it frees us from the exhausting effort of trying to make permanent what cannot last. When we truly understand that all things change, we can hold our experiences more lightly, appreciating them while they're here, without desperately clinging to them when they begin to transform into something else. Closely connected to impermanence is the second mark of existence, dukkha, often translated as suffering, though its meaning is deeper and more subtle than that single word suggests. Perhaps it's better understood as unsatisfactoriness, a gentle dissatisfaction that permeates our experience when we don't understand the true nature of reality. The Buddha wasn't teaching that life is only suffering, only pain. He walked through gardens in bloom. He witnessed acts of great kindness. He knew joy and friendship. But he observed, with the clarity that comes from deep meditation, that even our pleasant experiences carry within them a kind of tension, a subtle anxiety born from the knowledge that they will not last. We enjoy a beautiful sunset, and even in the enjoyment there's a whisper of sadness that it will soon fade. We love someone deeply, and woven into that love is the awareness of separation, of change, of loss. This is dukkha, not the dramatic suffering of illness or loss, but the quieter dissatisfaction that comes from wanting things to be other than they are, from wanting pleasant experiences to stay and unpleasant ones to leave, from wanting the river of life to stop flowing so we can hold on to this one perfect moment forever. The Buddha's great insight was that this suffering, this unsatisfactoriness, has a cause. It arises from tanha, craving, clinging, attachment. We suffer not because things change, but because we want them not to change. We suffer not because we experience pain, but because we resist that pain, fight against it, wish desperately for it to be different. Even our pleasures can become sources of suffering when we grasp at them too tightly, when we build our sense of identity and security around things that are, by their very nature, impermanent. Imagine holding a handful of sand, the Buddha might have said. Hold it loosely and you can carry it with ease. But close your fist tightly around it, trying to make sure not a single grain escapes, and you'll find that the sand slips through your fingers even faster. The tighter you squeeze, the more you lose. This is the nature of attachment, of clinging. And yet, the Buddha taught with such gentleness, we don't need to berate ourselves for this clinging. It's the most natural thing in the world. We're born reaching for warmth, for comfort, for connection. The practice is simply to notice this grasping when it arises, to observe it with compassion, and to slowly, gradually learn to hold our experiences with an open hand rather than a closed fist. The third mark of existence, perhaps the most subtle and profound, is anatta, the teaching of non-self or not-self. This concept invites us into deep reflection, gentle contemplation of a question that seems almost impossible at first. What are we really? The Buddha observed that we tend to believe in a fixed, permanent self, an unchanging essence that we call me or I, something solid and enduring that owns our experiences, that possesses our thoughts and feelings. But when he looked deeply, when he invited his students to look deeply, this solid self became harder and harder to find. Consider your body for a moment, resting wherever it rests right now. Is this yourself? But we've already seen that the body is constantly changing, impermanent, made up of elements borrowed temporarily from the earth and air and water, eventually to be returned. Consider your feelings, rising and falling like waves. Are these yourself? But feelings come and go, sometimes changing in an instant. You cannot be something that exists one moment and vanishes the next. Consider your thoughts, the constant stream of mental activity. Surely here we'll find the self, the thinker behind the thoughts. But watch your thoughts carefully, the Buddha suggested, and you'll notice that they too arise and pass away without your conscious control. You don't decide what thought will appear next in your mind. It simply appears, stays for a moment, and dissolves. The Buddha wasn't teaching that we don't exist at all. That would be another extreme, another mistake. Rather, he was pointing to a more nuanced understanding that what we call self is actually a process, not a thing. It's a flowing, changing collection of experiences, perceptions, thoughts, and sensations, all arising and passing in dependence on countless conditions. Like a river that we give a name to, the Ganges, the Mississippi, even though the water flowing through it is never the same water from one moment to the next. The river is real in a conventional sense, useful to talk about, and yet it has no fixed permanent essence. It's a process, a pattern, a continuous flow. Understanding non-self, like understanding impermanence, is deeply liberating. So much of our suffering comes from defending this self, from building it up, protecting it, comparing it to others, worrying about how it appears, anxious about its future, regretful about its past. When we begin to see through the illusion of a fixed, separate self, all of that struggle begins to relax. We can hold our sense of identity more lightly, more playfully. We can let experiences move through us without taking everything so personally, without believing that every thought is a truth and every feeling is a fact that defines who we are. With these three marks of existence as a foundation, impermanence, suffering, and non-self, the Buddha taught practices to help his students not just understand these truths intellectually, but experience them directly, intimately, in the depths of their own awareness. The most essential of these practices is mindfulness, a word that has traveled far from its ancient origins, but still carries its original meaning, a quality of attention, gentle and clear, that allows us to be present with whatever is arising in this moment without judgment, without the constant commentary of like and dislike, without the habit of pushing away what's unpleasant and grasping at what's pleasant. Mindfulness begins with something simple, something we carry with us always, the breath. The Buddha encouraged his students to find a quiet place, to sit comfortably, and to bring their attention to the natural rhythm of breathing. Not controlling the breath, not trying to make it special or different, but simply noticing it as it is. Feeling the cool air as it enters the nostrils, following its journey as the chest and belly gently expand, noticing the brief pause at the top of the inhalation, then observing the warm air as it flows back out, the gentle settling of the body, the space between breaths. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? And yet, if you try this practice even for a few moments, you'll discover something surprising. Your mind wanders constantly. You intend to follow the breath, and within seconds you're thinking about tomorrow's plans, or replaying a conversation from yesterday, or noticing a sound and spinning a story about it, or feeling an itch and wondering whether to scratch it. The mind, left to its own devices, is rarely present. It lives in memory and anticipation, in judgment and comparison, anywhere but here, anywhere but now. But mindfulness practice isn't about stopping thoughts or achieving some perfectly quiet mind. That's not the goal at all. The practice is simply to notice when the mind has wandered, and it will wander thousands of times. That's perfectly natural. And then, without judgment, without frustration, to gently return attention to the breath. That moment of noticing, that gentle return, that's the practice. Each time you bring your attention back, you're strengthening the capacity to be present, developing the muscle of awareness. Over time, this simple practice begins to change how we relate to all of our experience. We start to notice the space between stimulus and response, the gap where choice lives. Someone says something harsh, and instead of reacting immediately from habit, there's a moment of awareness, a pause where we can choose how to respond. A craving arises, and instead of automatically reaching to satisfy it, we can observe the craving itself with curiosity, noticing how it feels in the body, how it manifests as thoughts, how it changes and eventually passes if we simply observe it without acting on it. As Buddhist philosophy spread and evolved over centuries, different schools emerged, each offering its own perspective on these ancient teachings, like different windows looking into the same room, each revealing the space in a slightly different light. In one tradition, practitioners contemplate emptiness, shunyata, a concept that sounds abstract, but points to something intimate and immediate. Emptiness doesn't mean nothingness, doesn't mean that nothing exists. Rather, it refers to the empty nature of things, empty of independent, permanent existence. Everything that exists, this teaching tells us, exists only in relationship, only in dependence on countless causes and conditions. The flower in the garden is not separate from the soil that nourished it, the rain that watered it, the sun that warmed it, the seed from which it grew. It's empty of inherent existence, existing only as part of this vast web of interconnection. Even you, resting here now, exist not as an isolated island, but as part of an infinite network of relationships and conditions. Your body is made of food from the earth, your breath is shared with the trees, your thoughts are shaped by every conversation you've ever had, every book you've read, every experience that has touched you. We are not separate selves navigating an external world, but intimate participants in an unfolding process that includes everything. Other schools emphasize compassion as the natural expression of this understanding. When we truly see that we're not separate, when we understand that all beings suffer in similar ways, seek happiness in similar ways, compassion arises spontaneously, like water flowing downhill. The bodhisattva ideal emerged, the aspiration not just to achieve one's own liberation from suffering, but to remain in the world, helping all beings toward that same freedom. Infinite compassion for infinite beings, a vow so vast it could never be completed, and yet undertaken with complete sincerity and dedication. And still other traditions developed practices of direct pointing, moment-to-moment awareness that cuts through conceptual thinking to reveal the nature of mind itself. Sitting quietly, these practitioners would observe thoughts arising like clouds in an empty sky, appearing from nowhere, existing for a moment, dissolving back into spaciousness. They discovered that the mind observing thoughts is itself empty of characteristics, not a thing you can locate or describe, but simply aware, simply knowing, naturally present, like space itself. What all these schools share beneath their different emphases and practices is a common invitation to loosen our grip, to release our desperate clinging to how we think things should be, to open to the reality of how things actually are. This is the art of letting go that the Buddha taught, not a rejection of life, not a turning away from experience, but a profound relaxation into the flow of reality itself, meeting each moment with presence and compassion, allowing everything to be as it is while responding with wisdom to what each situation requires. As you rest now, perhaps you can feel this invitation yourself, this gentle possibility of releasing just a little bit of the tension we so habitually carry, softening into this moment exactly as it is, trusting in the natural wisdom that the Buddha pointed to so many centuries ago, trusting in your own capacity to wake up, to let go, to find peace. And from these Buddhist teachings of releasing and awakening, we now make a gentle journey, drifting peacefully across the ancient world, moving from India toward the East, toward China, where another way of understanding the art of letting go took root many centuries ago. We leave behind the figure of the Buddha beneath his Bodhi tree and turn our attention now toward a different teacher, a more mysterious figure, someone who may have lived in the 6th century before the Common Era, or perhaps a little later. The historical details grow hazy, like mist on a distant mountain, which seems fitting for a philosophy that celebrates mystery and embraces the unknown. His name was Lao Tzu, which means simply Old Master, and according to legend, he served as the keeper of the archives in the royal court, a quiet librarian of ancient wisdom, a man who preferred silence to speech, simplicity to complexity, and the natural way to the elaborate customs of civilization. The stories tell us that when he grew old, Lao Tzu became weary of the corruption and artificiality he saw around him, and so he decided to leave society behind entirely, to disappear into the western wilderness, riding on the back of a water buffalo, seeking solitude and simplicity. As he approached the western gate of the kingdom, the gatekeeper recognized this wise old man and asked him to write down his teachings before departing forever, and there, at that threshold between civilization and wilderness, Lao Tzu composed a brief text of about 5,000 characters, a collection of short, mysterious verses that would become known as the Tao Te Ching, the classic of the way and its virtue. And then, having left these teachings behind like footprints in the sand, he rode through the gate and vanished into legend, never to be seen again, becoming one with the mysterious way he had spent his life contemplating. Whether this story is historically true matters less than the wisdom it contains, this image of a sage who wrote only when leaving, who spoke only when departing, who understood that the deepest truths cannot be grasped or possessed, but only pointed toward, briefly, before letting them go. The text he left behind, the Tao Te Ching, has become one of the most translated works in all of human literature, second perhaps only to the Bible, and yet it remains one of the most mysterious, most paradoxical, most difficult to pin down or define, which is exactly as it should be, because the very first lines of the text warn us that the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, that the name that can be named is not the eternal name. We are being told right from the beginning that what we are about to explore cannot truly be captured in words, cannot be held in concepts, cannot be grasped by the thinking mind. And yet here are words, here are concepts, here is a text, pointing towards something beyond itself, using language to gesture toward the limits of language, creating a path that leads us beyond all paths. So let us enter into this gentle paradox now, with soft and open minds, not trying to understand too firmly or grasp too tightly, but rather allowing these ancient Chinese teachings to wash over us like water, like the flowing stream that Lao Tzu loved to contemplate, accepting that some wisdom is meant to be felt rather than thought, experienced rather than analyzed, lived rather than merely studied. The central concept of Lao Tzu's teaching, the idea that gives the text its name, is the Tao itself, a word that is sometimes translated as the way, sometimes as the path, but which ultimately points toward something much larger and more mysterious than any single word can contain. The Tao is the underlying principle of existence, the fundamental nature of reality, the source from which all things emerge and to which all things return. It is the pattern that moves through all of nature, the rhythm that pulses through the seasons, the intelligence that guides the stars in their courses and the seed in its growing. And yet it is also empty, nameless, formless, beyond all description. The Tao is both everything and nothing, both the fullness of existence and the emptiness from which existence springs, and any attempt to define it too precisely immediately misses the point. Because the Tao is precisely that which cannot be pinned down, cannot be captured, cannot be held. It is like water, which takes the shape of whatever container holds it, which flows downward to the lowest places, which yields and adapts and moves around obstacles, never forcing, never resisting, and yet over time wears away even the hardest stone. Lao Tzu returns again and again in the Tao Te Ching to this image of water, holding it up as the perfect teacher, the ideal model for how to live in harmony with the way. Water is soft and humble, always seeking the low places that others disdain, and yet nothing is stronger than water, nothing more essential, nothing more powerful in its gentle, persistent action. When water encounters a boulder in its path, it does not try to push through with force, does not struggle or fight or resist. Instead, it simply flows around, finding the path of least resistance, adapting its course to the conditions it meets, and continuing on its way. And if the boulder cannot be circumvented, water is patient, endlessly patient, content to pool and gather, to slowly seep and soften, until eventually, over years or centuries, the stone itself is worn smooth, is worn away, is transformed by this gentle, yielding, persistent presence. This is the way of the Tao. This is the wisdom that Lao Tzu invites us to contemplate, not the path of force and aggression, not the way of tension and striving, but rather the flowing, yielding, adapting way of water, which accomplishes everything by never trying to accomplish anything, which reaches every destination by never forcing its way forward. As you rest here now, breathing softly, you might imagine yourself as water, as a gentle stream flowing down a mountainside, moving naturally around whatever obstacles appear, not fighting, not forcing, simply flowing, always flowing, finding your way not through effort, but through yielding, through softness, through the natural intelligence of following the path that opens before you, moment by moment, breath by breath, flowing on and on, gently, easily, naturally, toward the great ocean that is both your destination and your source. From this contemplation of water and the Tao, we arrive naturally at one of the most important concepts in Taoist philosophy, an idea that appears throughout the Tao Te Ching, and that offers us perhaps the most practical guidance for living in harmony with the Way. This is the principle of Wu Wei, a Chinese term that is often translated as non-action, or effortless action, or action without forcing. But like so many concepts in Eastern philosophy, Wu Wei is easier to experience than to explain, easier to embody than to understand intellectually, and it certainly does not mean doing nothing or being passive or giving up on life. Rather, Wu Wei points toward a particular quality of action, a way of engaging with the world that is spontaneous rather than calculated, natural rather than forced, flowing from inner alignment rather than outer ambition. It is the difference between swimming against the current and swimming with it, between pushing a door that says pull and moving in harmony with its natural motion, between the strained effort of trying to force something to happen and the ease of allowing it to unfold in its own way and time. When we practice Wu Wei, we are not abandoning action, but rather abandoning the strain and tension that so often accompany action, releasing the tight grip of control, and instead trusting in the natural intelligence of the situation, responding spontaneously to what life presents, rather than imposing our rigid plans upon it. Think of a skilled craftsman who has practiced his art for so many years that he no longer needs to think about what he is doing. His hands move naturally, effortlessly, finding exactly the right gesture at exactly the right moment, not because he is trying hard, but because he has become so aligned with his craft that action flows through him like water through a riverbed. Or think of a tree growing, which does not strain or force itself upward, but simply follows its nature, responding to sunlight and moisture and the changing seasons, becoming exactly what it is meant to be through a process that is both entirely active and completely effortless. This is Wu Wei, action that arises from our deepest nature rather than from our anxious ego, movement that flows with the grain of reality rather than against it, effort that is so harmonious with the situation that it feels like no effort at all. Lao Tzu writes that the sage accomplishes much without doing anything, teaches without speaking, and influences others without interfering, not because the sage is passive or withdrawn, but because the sage has learned to align with the Tao, to move with the natural flow of things, to act when action is called for, and to remain still when stillness is appropriate, always responding to the present moment rather than imposing a predetermined agenda upon it. As you lie here now, breathing in and breathing out, you might notice that your breath happens by itself, without any need for you to make it happen. This is Wu Wei, this natural, effortless process that continues whether you think about it or not. And perhaps you can extend this quality of effortlessness to your entire being right now, not trying to relax, but simply allowing relaxation to happen naturally, not forcing yourself to let go, but noticing where letting go might already be occurring, where softness might already be present, where the natural wisdom of your body and mind might already be guiding you toward rest, toward peace, toward the effortless ease of simply being here now, without needing to do anything at all. Lao Tzu's teachings in the Tao Te Ching return again and again to certain themes, certain images from nature that help us understand how to live in harmony with the way. And one of these recurring themes is the importance of emptiness, of space, of the usefulness of what is not there. He reminds us that we make a clay vessel, a pot or a bowl, by shaping the clay. But it is the empty space inside the vessel that makes it useful. We can fill that emptiness with water or grain or whatever we need to carry. We make a room by building walls and a roof, by constructing solid matter, but it is the empty space inside the room that we actually use for living. We make a wheel by connecting spokes to a hub, but it is the empty space at the center, the hole through which the axle passes, that allows the wheel to turn and serve its purpose. In each case, the usefulness comes not from the solid matter we can see and touch, but from the empty space, the nothing that allows the something to function. This is a profound teaching, pointing us toward a way of seeing that reverses our usual assumptions about what is valuable and important. We tend to focus on the tangible, the visible, the solid things we can grasp and name and possess. But Lao Tzu is gently suggesting that emptiness is equally important, perhaps even more important, that space, silence, stillness, and simplicity are not mere absences, but rather fertile presences, potent sources of possibility and peace. The sage, according to Lao Tzu, empties the mind of unnecessary thoughts and desires, empties the heart of grasping and ambition, becomes like an empty vessel that can receive whatever the moment brings without being already full of preconceptions and preferences. This emptiness is not a void or a lack, but rather a spaciousness, an openness, a receptivity that allows life to flow through without obstruction. It is similar to the Buddhist teaching of emptiness we explored earlier, but with perhaps a softer emphasis, a more nature-based poetry to it. The emptiness of the valley that allows the stream to flow through, the emptiness of the sky that gives space for clouds to drift across, the emptiness at the center of the wheel that allows all movement and journey. As you rest here, you might notice the spaces between your thoughts, those brief gaps of quiet that appear naturally in the mind. These spaces are not interruptions or problems to be solved, but rather little pockets of peace, momentary returns to the emptiness that is always present beneath the busy surface of thinking. And you might notice the space in the room around you, the air that fills the space between your body and the walls, the silence that holds all sounds, the stillness that allows all movement. All of this emptiness is not nothing, but rather the generous spaciousness in which everything arises and passes away. Lao Tzu teaches us to value this emptiness, to create space in our lives, to cultivate simplicity, to let go of the excess possessions and activities and concerns that clutter our days, not because we want to be impoverished or diminished, but because we understand that the empty space is where the usefulness lies, where peace dwells, where the Tao can move freely through our lives like wind through an open window, like water through an unobstructed channel, naturally, effortlessly, bringing whatever is needed in this moment, and then flowing on, leaving no trace, as we rest here in this spacious, empty, infinitely peaceful present. Throughout the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu presents us with a series of gentle paradoxes, teachings that seem to contradict our ordinary assumptions about success and strength and value, inviting us to see the world from a different perspective through the eyes of the Tao itself. He tells us that the softest thing in the world overcomes the hardest thing in the world, that yielding is the way to preserve wholeness, that the tree which bends in the wind survives the storm while the rigid tree breaks and falls. He suggests that we should prize weakness over strength, humility over pride, simplicity over complexity, stillness over constant activity. Those who stand on tiptoe cannot stand firmly, he writes, and those who rush ahead cannot travel far. The journey requires a natural pace, a sustainable rhythm, and acceptance of our human limitations rather than a constant striving to transcend them. The sage, in Lao Tzu's vision, is not someone who dominates and conquers and accumulates, but rather someone who knows contentment, who understands that enough is enough, who can be satisfied with simplicity, who finds richness in ordinary moments rather than constantly seeking extraordinary experiences. This is not a teaching of resignation or defeat, but rather a teaching of profound wisdom, an understanding that much of our suffering comes from our constant grasping after more possessions, more status, more experiences, more of everything. And that peace comes from releasing this endless hunger, from recognizing that we already have what we need, that we already are what we need to be, that this present moment, exactly as it is, contains a fullness that no amount of striving can improve upon. The Taoist sage lives close to nature, observing its patterns, learning from its wisdom, understanding that nature never hurries, yet everything is accomplished in its proper time. The seasons change without forcing, the flowers bloom when conditions are right, the bird sings not because it has a message to deliver, but simply because singing is its nature. This is the way of the Tao, natural, spontaneous, simple, unforced, and this is the way we are invited to live, not according to artificial rules and complicated systems, but according to our own deep nature, our own authentic being, responding freshly to each moment, rather than following rigid programs inherited from others. As you rest here, in this gentle darkness, breathing softly, you might feel yourself settling more deeply into your own nature, releasing the layers of should and must and have to that we accumulate over a lifetime, softening into a simpler way of being, a more natural rhythm, a more spacious presence that trusts in the wisdom of what is, rather than constantly striving for what might be. You might notice that you don't need to do anything at all right now, that simply being here, breathing, resting, allowing, is enough, more than enough, is in fact the perfect activity for this moment, the natural expression of your deepest self, the embodiment of Wu Wei, of effortless action, of flowing with the Tao like a leaf floating on a stream, going wherever the current takes it, not struggling, not questioning, not planning the route ahead, but simply moving with what is, trusting in the natural intelligence of water to find its way home to the sea, trusting in your own natural intelligence to find your way home to peace, to rest, to the deep stillness that has always been here, waiting patiently beneath all your striving, all your effort, all your seeking, waiting to receive you with the gentleness of water, the spaciousness of sky, the unchanging presence of the Tao itself, which was never lost and can never be found, because it is what you are, what you have always been, what you will always be, here, now, resting, releasing, letting go. And from this resting place, this spacious silence where the Tao simply is, we drift gently forward in time, drifting like leaves on a slow river, moving from Lao Tzu's timeless wisdom toward another voice, another dreamer of the way. We are still in ancient China, still walking the path that winds through bamboo forests and beside clear streams, but now we move toward the 4th century before the Common Era, where we will meet a philosopher quite different from the austere and mysterious Lao Tzu. His name was Zhuangzi, sometimes spelled Chuang-Tzu, and where Lao Tzu spoke in brief crystalline verses, Zhuangzi danced with words, painting parables and stories, weaving humor and paradox together like threads of silk, teaching through tales that shimmer with meaning the way water shimmers with light. We know little of his life with certainty, as is often the way with ancient wisdom, but we know he lived during the Warring States period, a time of conflict and chaos, when philosophers traveled from kingdom to kingdom, offering their teachings to rulers seeking order. Yet Zhuangzi, it seems, cared little for the courts of power. He preferred his freedom, his wandering, his time to watch the fish swimming in the streams and the butterflies floating among the flowers. Legend tells that when a king sent messengers offering him a high position, Zhuangzi asked them whether they had heard of the sacred tortoise, dead for 3,000 years, whose bones were wrapped in silk and kept in a royal temple. Would that tortoise, he asked, prefer to be dead and venerated, or alive and dragging its tail in the mud? The messengers replied that of course it would prefer to be alive, dragging its tail in the mud. And so Zhuangzi said, "Go away and let me drag my tail in the mud." This is the spirit of Zhuangzi, this preference for living freedom over gilded honor, this joy in the simple and the spontaneous, this recognition that what the world calls useless might contain the deepest usefulness of all. And as we settle into his world, breathing slowly, releasing any remaining tension, we begin to understand that Zhuangzi's teachings are not meant to be grasped tightly in the mind, analyzed and categorized, but rather experienced like a dream, allowed to drift through consciousness the way clouds drift across the vast sky, changing shape, dissolving, reforming, never quite solid, always pointing toward something beyond words, something that can only be known by letting go of the need to know. Perhaps Zhuangzi's most famous teaching comes to us in the form of a dream, simple and profound, a story that has echoed across centuries, rippling outward through time like circles on water. One night, Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly, fluttering freely among the flowers, happy and content, completely himself, utterly a butterfly with no knowledge that he was Zhuangzi. Then suddenly he awoke, and there he was, solid and unmistakable, Zhuangzi himself. But now he had a question without an easy answer, a question that opens into mystery, the way a door opens into a moonlit garden. Was he Zhuangzi who had dreamed he was a butterfly? Or was he now a butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzi? Between Zhuangzi and the butterfly there must be some distinction, he said, and this is called the transformation of things. Let us rest with this story for a moment, breathing gently, allowing it to settle into the quiet spaces of awareness. What is Zhuangzi inviting us to see? He is not simply playing word games or presenting a riddle to be solved. He is pointing us toward the profound relativity of experience, the way that what we call reality depends entirely on perspective, on the particular dream we happen to be dreaming in this moment. When you were the butterfly was your entire world, your complete reality, total and unquestioned. When you are Zhuangzi, Zhuangzi is your entire world. But which is more real? Which is more true? And in asking this question, something begins to loosen, some tight grip we have on the certainty of our perspective, the solidity of our identity, the fixed nature of what we call the self. Perhaps you are dreaming now, listening to these words, and perhaps later you will awaken into another dream, and then another, each one feeling utterly real while you are in it, each one dissolving when you pass into the next. And if this is so, then what need is there to cling so tightly to the contents of this particular dream? What need is there to grasp and defend and preserve something that is already changing, already transforming, already dissolving into the next moment, like morning mist dissolving in the gentle warmth of the rising sun? Zhuangzi's butterfly is an invitation to lightness, to freedom, to the playful recognition that the boundaries we draw between self and other, between human and butterfly, between waking and dreaming, are not as solid as they seem. And in seeing their transparency, we become transparent too, able to move freely through life the way a butterfly moves freely through the air, landing here, landing there, belonging nowhere, belonging everywhere, completely at home. Zhuangzi taught through stories, through parables that work on the mind the way water works on stone, not through force, but through gentle, persistent presence. And in these stories, again and again, we find the theme of usefulness and uselessness, of value and worthlessness, and how the world's judgments about these things might be entirely backwards, entirely upside down, like a reflection in water. There was once a carpenter named Shi who was traveling with his apprentice, and they came upon a massive oak tree standing near a village shrine. It was enormous, ancient beyond measure, so large that thousands of oxen could shelter beneath its branches. The apprentice was in awe, but the master carpenter barely glanced at it. When the apprentice asked why he showed no interest in such a magnificent tree, the carpenter said it was a worthless tree, useless tree, that its wood was good for nothing, that if you tried to make a boat it would sink, if you tried to make a pillar it would rot, if you tried to make furniture it would fall apart. That is why it has lived so long, he said. That night the tree appeared to the carpenter in a dream and spoke. You compare me to useful trees, it said, to fruit trees that are torn apart when their fruit ripens, to trees cut down when their wood is valuable. Their usefulness is what destroys them. But I have been useless for a long time, and this uselessness is exactly what has been useful to me. If I had been useful, do you think I would have grown so large? And now you and I, are we not both things? What business does one worthless thing have judging another? Let us breathe with this story, breathing slowly, feeling the gentle rise and fall of the breath, requiring nothing from it, demanding no usefulness from this simple act of breathing. What Zhuangzi is offering here is not a praise of laziness or incompetence, but a profound questioning of the values by which we judge ourselves and others, by which we push ourselves to be productive, useful, valuable by the world's standards. The tree survived precisely because it offered nothing the world wanted to take. It was left alone to grow according to its own nature, to fulfill its own life, reaching toward the sky in its own way, spreading its branches according to its own inner pattern. And in this teaching, there is an invitation for us, too. Perhaps what the world calls our uselessness is actually our protection. Perhaps what appears to be our flaws, our irregularities, our strange shapes and odd grains, are exactly what allow us to remain whole, to grow according to our nature, rather than being cut and shaped by external demands. The pressure to be useful, to be productive, to justify our existence through our achievements is a heavy weight to carry. But here, in the gentle darkness of this evening, breathing softly, letting go a little more with each breath, we can rest in the possibility that we are enough exactly as we are, useful or useless by the world's measure, valuable simply because we exist, because we are part of the great transformation of things, temporary and precious like butterflies, like trees, like everything that lives and breathes and then returns to the silence from which it came. Another story comes to us from Zhuangzi, another doorway into a different way of seeing, a different way of being. Zhuangzi was walking with his friend Huizi along the banks of a river, watching the water flow, watching the light play on the surface, when he noticed fish swimming in the clear depths below. Look how the fish come out and swim around as they please, Zhuangzi said. That is what fish really enjoy. But Huizi, who was a logician, a man who trusted reason and argument, replied skeptically. You are not a fish, he said. How do you know what fish enjoy? And Zhuangzi smiled and said, You are not me. How do you know I don't know what fish enjoy? Back and forth they went, in a gentle spiral of logic, until Zhuangzi brought the conversation back to the beginning. When you asked how I knew what fish enjoy, he said, You already knew that I knew it. I knew it by standing here, by the river. Let us pause here, letting the story settle, letting the sound of the river flow through our imagination, the soft rushing of water over stones, eternal and peaceful. What is Zhuangzi pointing toward in this exchange? He is not claiming some mystical telepathy with fish, some supernatural knowledge. He is pointing toward a different kind of knowing, a knowing that comes not from analytical distance, but from presence, from standing by the river, from being there with the fish, from participating in the same moment, the same flow of life. This is the knowing that comes through resonance, through empathy, through the recognition that we are not separate observers, standing outside of life but part of life itself, connected to fish and rivers and butterflies and trees in ways that go deeper than words or logic. When we stand by the river, really stand there, present and open, we know the joy of the fish, not because we have reasoned our way to it, but because we feel it, directly, immediately, in the same way we know the warmth of sunlight on our skin without needing to measure its temperature or calculate its wavelength. This is the wisdom of Zhuangzi, a wisdom that cannot be grasped by the analyzing mind, but only by the whole being, present and aware, flowing with life rather than standing apart from it. And as we rest here in the darkness, breathing gently, we might notice that this same knowing is available to us now. We do not need to understand everything about the breath to feel it moving. We do not need to explain the nature of relaxation to allow it to happen. We do not need to be certain about the boundary between waking and sleeping to drift peacefully between them. We can know as Zhuangzi knew by being present, by standing here, by this river of consciousness that flows through every moment, carrying us gently forward, carrying us gently down, deeper into rest, deeper into peace, deeper into the simple joy of being alive, here now, with nothing to prove and nowhere to go. Zhuangzi spoke of the unity of opposites, of how what seems different is actually one, what seems separate is actually joined, what seems to conflict is actually dancing together in the great transformation of things. He spoke of winter and summer, life and death, being and non-being, not as opposing forces, but as parts of a single flowing process, like the turning of a great wheel, like the cycling of breath in and out, like the rhythm of day flowing into night, flowing into day again. Right and wrong, he suggested, are like this too, not absolute categories, but relative positions, depending entirely on where you stand, on which dream you are dreaming. What the caterpillar calls disaster, the butterfly calls birth. What seems like an ending from one perspective is a beginning from another. And in seeing this, in allowing this truth to penetrate deeper than the thinking mind, something profound can happen. The rigid categories that we use to organize experience begin to soften. The sharp boundaries we have drawn begin to blur. The tight grip we have on our preferences, our judgments, our insistence that life should be this way and not that way, begins to loosen. And in that loosening, there is tremendous relief, like setting down a heavy weight we didn't know we were carrying. Zhuangzi called this the axis of the Tao, the still point at the center of the turning wheel, where all opposites are united, where all conflicts dissolve, where there is only the great flow of life itself, unfolding according to its own nature, perfect and complete, in every moment exactly as it is. And from this center point, this axis of stillness, we can watch the wheel turn, watch the opposites dance, watch life moving through its endless transformations, and we can move with it, freely, lightly, like butterflies, like water, like wind in the bamboo, bending but not breaking, yielding but not defeated, flowing but never lost. As we rest here now, breathing softly in the gentle darkness, we can feel ourselves settling toward that center, toward that axis of stillness, where nothing needs to be held and everything is allowed to be exactly as it is. The breath flows in and the breath flows out, and we are not doing it. It is simply happening, life breathing itself, consciousness experiencing itself, the Tao flowing through this particular form, this particular dream, for this particular moment. And in this recognition, this gentle letting go of the need to control or understand or fix or change, there is a deep peace, deeper than sleep, deeper than dreams, the peace of the butterfly that does not question its flight, the peace of the fish that does not doubt its joy, the peace of the useless tree that grows vast and magnificent, precisely because it has nothing to offer the world except its own vast and magnificent being. Let the breath grow softer now, slower, as gentle as mist settling on morning grass, as quiet as snow falling in an empty forest. Let the body grow heavier, sinking into whatever supports it, supported completely, held by the earth, held by gravity, held by this moment that asks nothing from you except your presence, your gentle awareness, your willingness to let go, to drift, to transform, like all things transform, like Zhuangzi transforming into a butterfly, transforming into Zhuangzi, transforming into this moment, this breath, this peace, this letting go. And so we arrive at the end of our journey, though in truth there is no end, no arrival. Only this eternal present moment that asks nothing from you except your presence, your gentle awareness, your willingness to let go, to drift, to transform like all things transform, like Zhuangzi transforming into a butterfly, transforming into Zhuangzi, transforming into this moment, this breath, this peace, this letting go. We have walked together through ancient India and ancient China, through the wisdom of the Buddha and the mystery of Lao Tzu, through the teachings of mindfulness and the poetry of Wu Wei. And now these streams of wisdom flow together, like rivers meeting the ocean, becoming one body of water, one understanding, one gentle truth that whispers, nothing needs to be held, everything simply is. Let us rest here together in this space of integration, this peaceful place where Buddhist and Taoist wisdom merge like morning mist merging with the dawn, where the art of letting go becomes as natural as breathing, as effortless as your breath moving in and moving out, asking nothing, holding nothing, simply flowing with the way things are. The Buddha taught us about impermanence, about the constant flowing nature of all things, how everything arises and passes away like clouds forming and dissolving in an empty sky. And Lao Tzu showed us the Tao, the way that flows like water, that moves without forcing, that accomplishes without striving. These are not different teachings, you see, but the same truth spoken in different languages, the same wisdom reflected in different mirrors. Impermanence and flow, non-attachment and Wu Wei, mindfulness and harmony, all of these concepts are pointing to the same peaceful reality, the same gentle understanding that liberation comes not from grasping, but from releasing, not from controlling, but from allowing, not from resisting the current, but from floating with it, trusting it, becoming one with it. And you can feel this now, can't you, in your body as it rests, as it settles more deeply into comfort, into softness, into release. Your body already knows how to let go. It does it every night as you drift towards sleep. It releases tension without your effort, softens without your command, surrenders to rest without your control. This is Wu Wei in your very muscles and bones, effortless action, natural letting go. Your breath, too, knows the way. You don't have to think about breathing. It happens on its own, moving in and moving out like the tide, like the rhythm of the Tao itself flowing through you, as you, breathing you without any effort on your part. Notice how your breath is simply happening, how it requires nothing from you, how it continues whether you pay attention to it or not. Faithful as the turning of the earth, gentle as morning light. This is the secret that both Buddha and Lao Tzu discovered in their different ways, that life itself knows how to live, that existence knows how to exist, that the universe unfolds according to its own wisdom, and we can trust this unfolding. We can relax into this flow. We can let go of the exhausting effort to control and manipulate and force, and instead simply be present, simply aware, simply here. Letting go doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. It means aligning yourself with the natural flow of things, moving with the current rather than against it, responding to life with the spontaneity of water that takes the shape of whatever container it finds, that flows around obstacles rather than fighting them, that seeks the lowest place, and in doing so becomes powerful without effort, present without strain. As you rest here in this moment, let yourself contemplate the Four Noble Truths that Buddha taught beneath the Bodhi tree, those simple, profound insights into the nature of suffering and its cessation. There is suffering, he said. Suffering has a cause. Suffering can end. And there is a path to its ending. Such gentle, hopeful wisdom, not denying the difficulty of life, but offering a way through it, a way that begins with letting go. The cause of suffering, Buddha taught, is craving, clinging, attachment, this desperate grasping at things we want to keep, this fierce pushing away of things we want to avoid. We exhaust ourselves trying to freeze the pleasant moments and make them permanent, trying to eliminate the unpleasant moments and pretend they don't exist. But life flows on regardless, changing and transforming, and our resistance to this flow creates the friction we experience as suffering. What if you could simply let things be as they are? What if you could experience pleasant moments without clinging to them, knowing they will naturally pass? What if you could experience difficult moments without pushing them away, knowing they too will naturally pass? This is the practice of non-attachment that Buddha taught, and it is the same as Wu Wei, the effortless action of the Tao, the same gentle allowing, the same peaceful release. Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching, "The sage does not hoard. The more he gives to others, the more he has for himself. The more he gives, the more he receives." This beautiful paradox reveals the secret of letting go, that in releasing our tight grip on things, we actually open ourselves to receive more fully, to experience more deeply, to live more abundantly. The empty cup can be filled. The open hand can receive gifts. The released breath makes space for the next breath. And you can feel this in your body even now as you allow yourself to sink more deeply into rest, to release more completely into comfort. Each time you exhale, you're practicing letting go. Each time you soften a tight muscle, you're practicing non-attachment. Each time you allow a thought to drift by without chasing it, you're practicing Wu Wei, effortless non-action, the art of not interfering with the natural flow of mind. Zhuangzi told a story about a butcher who had used the same knife for 19 years without ever needing to sharpen it. How was this possible? Because he had learned to cut through the spaces between the bones and joints, moving with the natural structure of the ox rather than forcing his blade through resistance. He had found the way of no resistance, the path of effortless action, and his work became like a dance, beautiful and easy. This is how we might move through life when we practice the art of letting go, finding the spaces, flowing around obstacles, moving with the grain rather than against it, dancing with circumstances rather than fighting them. Not passive, but responsive, not weak, but fluid, not defeated, but at peace with the way things are. Your mind may wander as you listen to these words, drifting away into thoughts or dreams or the borderland between waking and sleeping, and this too is perfectly natural, perfectly fine. You don't need to concentrate or remember or hold on to anything you hear. Let these words wash over you like gentle waves washing over sand, smoothing and soothing, requiring nothing from you, asking only that you rest, that you breathe, that you allow yourself to be exactly as you are in this moment. Let us return once more to the idea of impermanence, that fundamental truth that both Buddha and the Taoist sages recognized. Everything changes, everything flows, everything transforms. The seasons turn, the river runs, the mountains slowly wear away to sand. Nothing stays the same, nothing can be held. And this truth, which might seem sad or frightening at first, becomes deeply peaceful when we truly accept it, when we stop fighting it, when we let go of our desire to freeze time and make the impermanent permanent. Watch how your breath demonstrates impermanence. Each breath arises, exists for a moment, and passes away. You cannot hold on to a breath. You cannot save it for later. You must release it to make room for the next one. And this releasing, this letting go, this constant dying of one breath and a rising of another, this is not sad, is it? This is simply how breathing works, how life works, how the Tao flows through all things. Your thoughts, too, are impermanent, arising and passing like clouds in the sky of your mind. You don't have to chase them or cling to them or identify with them. They come and they go, and the awareness that watches them is like the sky itself, vast, spacious, unchanging, even as everything within it constantly changes. Buddha called this awareness mindfulness, this gentle attention to what is, without judgment, without grasping, without resistance. And Lao Tzu called it returning to the Tao, returning to the source, the mysterious origin from which all things emerge and to which all things return. He wrote, "All things arise from the Tao. They are nourished by virtue. They are formed from matter. They are shaped by environment. Thus the 10,000 things all respect Tao and honor virtue. Respect of Tao and honor of virtue are not demanded, but they are in the nature of things. This is what it means to let go, to trust the nature of things, to honor the way things are, to stop demanding that reality be different from what it is. Not resignation, not defeat, but a kind of profound acceptance, a deep peace that comes from aligning yourself with truth rather than fighting against it. The tree doesn't demand that winter not come. The river doesn't demand that it not flow downhill. They simply follow their nature effortlessly, gracefully, peacefully. As you lie here resting, your body is following its nature, slowly releasing into sleep, gradually softening into deeper and deeper relaxation. You don't have to make this happen. You don't have to try to fall asleep. Sleep will come in its own time, naturally, the way night follows day, the way the tide rises and falls. All you need to do is allow it, not resist it, not fight it, not anxiously chase it. Let go of effort, let go of trying, let go of wanting anything to be different than it is. The Buddha's final words, according to tradition, were, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your own salvation with diligence." Even in these last moments he pointed to impermanence and encouraged his followers to continue the practice of letting go, of seeing clearly, of waking up to the truth of how things are. And yet there's a beautiful paradox here, working diligently at letting go, practicing the art of non-attachment, making effort to discover effortlessness. This paradox dissolves when we understand that the practice itself is natural, is aligned with our true nature, is simply a returning to what we already are beneath all the layers of conditioning and habit. We practice letting go not to become someone different, but to remember who we already are, awareness itself, peace itself, the space in which all experience arises and passes away. In this deep quietness, let us reflect on the concept of emptiness, shunyata, that profound teaching from Buddhist philosophy that points to the empty, open, spacious nature of all things. Not empty in the sense of void or nothingness, but empty of fixed, separate, independent existence. Everything is connected to everything else, arising in dependence on countless causes and conditions, like waves arising from the ocean, inseparable from the ocean, made of the same water, the same substance. This teaching of emptiness is echoed in the Taoist understanding of the Tao as formless, nameless, beyond all categories and concepts, the mysterious source that can be pointed to but never grasped, experienced but never captured, followed but never possessed. Lao Tzu wrote, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name." And yet here we are, using words and names to point towards something beyond words and names, like a finger pointing at the moon. Don't worry if these concepts seem abstract or difficult to grasp. You don't need to understand them intellectually. In fact, trying too hard to understand them might take you further from the truth they're pointing toward. Instead, simply rest in this moment, in your direct experience of being here, breathing, aware, present. This is the truth beneath all the concepts, this simple, direct, immediate experience of existing, of awareness, of being. Your breath is empty in the Buddhist sense. It has no fixed, permanent essence. It arises from the air around you, from the movement of your diaphragm, from countless causes and conditions. It exists for a moment and then dissolves back into the air. And yet this emptiness doesn't make your breath less real or less important. On the contrary, it's because of this emptiness, this openness, this lack of fixed essence that your breath can flow, can move, can sustain your life moment by moment. The same is true of your thoughts, your feelings, your sense of self. Empty of fixed essence, yet vividly present. Impermanent, yet fully here. Dependent on countless conditions, yet undeniably real in this moment. This is the paradox that awakened beings throughout history have tried to communicate, that emptiness and form are not two different things, that letting go doesn't mean losing anything, that releasing your grip reveals something more precious than anything you could hold. Lao Tzu celebrated emptiness in practical, everyday terms. He wrote about how the usefulness of a cup comes from its emptiness, how the usefulness of a room comes from the empty space within it, how the usefulness of a wheel comes from the empty hub at its center. Emptiness, he showed us, is not lack but potential, not absence but openness, not nothing but space for everything. And you can feel this emptiness, this openness, in the space between your thoughts right now. Notice how thoughts arise from silence, exist for a moment, and dissolve back into silence. Notice how the silence is always there, vast and peaceful, unchanging while everything else changes. This silence is like the emptiness of the cup, making room for experience, allowing life to flow through you without obstruction, without resistance. As you sink deeper into rest, deeper into the embrace of this moment, you might notice how letting go creates space, how releasing tension opens up new possibilities, how surrendering effort allows something natural and healing to occur. This is the wisdom of emptiness in action, the power of Wu Wei, the grace of non-attachment, not doing nothing, but allowing the right action to emerge naturally, spontaneously, effortlessly from the spacious awareness that you are. Let your mind be like the sky, vast and open, allowing clouds to pass through without clinging to them. Let your heart be like water, soft and yielding, yet capable of wearing away stone through gentle persistence over time. Let your breath be like the Tao itself, flowing in and flowing out, asking nothing, holding nothing, simply being. And now, as we come to rest in this eternal present moment, let all of these teachings and concepts and ideas dissolve like mist, dissolving in morning sun, leaving only the direct experience of being here, now, breathing, aware, at peace. The Buddha is not somewhere in the past. Lao Tzu is not a distant historical figure. Zhuangzi is not just a character in an old story. They are here now, in this wisdom that flows through you, in this capacity you have to let go, to be present, to rest in what is. The art of letting go is not something you need to learn from ancient books or distant teachers. It's already happening in you, has been happening your whole life. Every time you exhale, you let go. Every time you fall asleep, you let go. Every time you heal from an injury, you let go and allow your body's wisdom to do its work. Every time you forgive, every time you accept what is, every time you stop struggling and simply be, you are practicing the ancient wisdom of Buddha and Lao Tzu, whether you know it or not. So let yourself rest in this knowing, this deep, wordless understanding that needs no scripture, no teaching, no concept. Your body knows how to rest. Your breath knows how to flow. Your mind knows how to be still. Trust this knowing. Trust the way things are unfolding in this very moment, exactly as they are, perfect in their imperfection, complete in their incompleteness, whole in their constant changing. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to achieve, nothing you need to become. The way you are right now in this moment is enough, more than enough. You are already complete, already whole, already free. The prison was always imaginary. The freedom was always here. The peace you've been seeking has been present all along, waiting patiently for you to stop seeking and simply notice it, like noticing the silence that was always there beneath the noise. Let go of the day behind you, all its efforts and achievements and disappointments. Let go of the tomorrow ahead of you, all its plans and worries and anticipations. Let go of the need to be anywhere other than here, to be anyone other than who you are, to do anything other than breathe and rest and be. This moment right now is enough. This breath is enough. This peace is enough. The river of the Tao flows through all things, and you are not separate from it. You are not a separate self struggling to survive in an alien universe. You are the universe itself, looking out through these particular eyes, breathing through these particular lungs, resting in this particular body. When you let go, you don't lose yourself. You discover your true self, vast as the sky, deep as the ocean, ancient as the Tao itself. Buddha found peace beneath the Bodhi tree by letting go of his striving for enlightenment. Lao Tzu found the way by becoming so ordinary, so simple, so natural, that he disappeared into the Tao like a drop returning to the ocean. And you can find this same peace, this same way, not by going somewhere or becoming someone, but by releasing your grip, softening your effort, allowing yourself to be held by this moment, this breath, this peace that was never absent, only overlooked. Let these final words dissolve now. Let the story fade. Let all concepts and teachings return to the silence from which they came, and rest. Simply rest. In the eternal present, where nothing needs to be held, where everything simply is, as you are, as life is, as the Tao flows, letting go, letting be at peace, complete, whole, here, now, and always. This moment, this breath, this peace, letting go, letting go, letting go. Thank you for listening tonight. If this story helped you drift off, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more calming stories. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you next time.